My 16-year-old stepson looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll never prove I'm lying." 3 hours later, CPS was at my door, examining photos of bruises he'd painted on himself with makeup. I was facing jail time for child abuse I never committed. But Alex made one crucial mistake. He documented everything. What happened next didn't just clear my name, it destroyed his entire future. Hit that subscribe button because this is Letters to Ray, where the most unbelievable revenge stories get told. Like this video if you believe liars should face consequences, and let's dive into how a teenager's own arrogance became his downfall. Dear Ray, I'm writing this letter 6 months after the dust settled, and I still can't believe how close I came to losing everything. Not just my marriage, my career, or my freedom, but my entire sense of who I am as a person. When someone accuses you of hurting a child, especially when that accusation comes from the child themselves, you start questioning your own sanity. Did I really do something? Am I remembering wrong? The psychological warfare that my stepson Alex waged against me was so sophisticated, so calculated, that even now I have to remind myself that I was the victim, not him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because the full story is so much worse and so much more satisfying than you could imagine. 2.5 years ago, I met Tom at a coffee shop near the elementary school where I taught 3rd grade. He was there with his son Alex, who was 14 at the time, helping him with homework. Tom was recently divorced, had been single for about a year, and was clearly devoted to his kid. That should have been my first red flag, not that he was devoted, but the way Alex commanded his father's complete attention. Even during our first conversation, Alex would interrupt constantly. Not in the cute, attention-seeking way that kids sometimes do, but with this calculated precision. Every time Tom and I started connecting, every time we laughed together, Alex would suddenly need help with his math, or have an urgent question about soccer practice, or remember something important he had to tell his dad right that second. But Tom was charming, successful, and genuinely kind. He owned a small but thriving marketing firm, was involved in the community, and seemed like the kind of stable, mature man I'd been hoping to find. And honestly, I felt sorry for Alex. His parents' divorce had been messy. His mother, Sarah, had moved 3 states away for a new job and new boyfriend, and he was clearly struggling with the changes in his life. So when Tom and I started dating seriously, I went out of my way to include Alex. I attended his soccer games, helped with school projects when Tom was traveling for work, and tried to find common ground with him. I genuinely wanted to be a positive influence in his life. The problem started small. Alex would forget to tell me about school events Tom had asked me to attend, leaving me embarrassed when I'd show up to an empty field because practice had been canceled. He'd eat the special groceries I bought for dinners I was planning, then act confused when I mentioned it. "Oh, I didn't know those were for anything special. Dad never told me." When I'd bring these incidents up to Tom, Alex always had perfectly reasonable explanations. He was forgetful because he was stressed about his parents' divorce. He didn't understand the grocery situation because he wasn't used to someone else planning meals. Tom would apologize for his son and promise to communicate better, but I could see Alex watching these conversations with something that looked almost like amusement. The first major incident happened about 6 months into my relationship with Tom. I was staying over on a Saturday night, and Alex's friend Jake was sleeping over too. Around midnight, I woke up to go to the bathroom and found both boys in the kitchen, clearly having snuck out and back in. They reeked of alcohol and marijuana. I was in an impossible position. I wasn't Alex's parent, but I couldn't just ignore 2 14-year-olds who were obviously intoxicated. I told them to go to bed and said we'd discuss it in the morning when Tom woke up. But when morning came, Alex struck first. "Dad, I need to tell you something," he said at breakfast, his voice small and shaky. "Jennifer was really weird last night. She came into the kitchen while Jake and I were getting snacks and started accusing us of being drunk. She was acting really paranoid and aggressive." I felt my mouth fall open. "Alex, that's not what happened. You and Jake were clearly—" "I don't know why she'd say that," Alex continued, his eyes filling with tears. "We were just hungry. But she kept insisting we'd been drinking and saying she was going to tell you." "Dad, I'm scared." Why would she lie about us like that? Tom looked between us, confused and uncomfortable. Jake, who'd been coached by Alex, nodded along with the story. Yeah, Mr. Morrison, we were just making sandwiches. Jennifer seemed really angry for some reason. That's when I realized what I was dealing with. Alex wasn't just a resentful teenager acting out. He was a master manipulator who could lie with the innocence of a choir boy. And he'd turned the situation completely around, making me look like the unstable adult picking on innocent kids. Tom ultimately decided to let it go rather than figure out who was telling the truth. But I saw the doubt in his eyes when he looked at me. Alex had planted a seed. Over the next year, as Tom and I got more serious and started talking about marriage, Alex's campaign against me became more sophisticated. He'd be sweet as pie when Tom was around, calling me Jennifer with perfect politeness, thanking me for dinners I cooked, even occasionally asking for my help with homework. But the moment we were alone, his mask would slip. You know he's only with you because he's lonely, right? He said to me one day when Tom was in the shower. My mom was way prettier and smarter. Dad's just settling because he doesn't want to be alone. Alex, that's hurtful and not appropriate. He shrugged. I'm just being honest. You seem nice enough, but you're not family. You'll never be family. These little psychological attacks were carefully timed and perfectly deniable. If I mentioned them to Tom, Alex would look genuinely confused and hurt. I was just making conversation, he'd say. I didn't mean anything bad by it. I'm sorry if Jennifer misunderstood. The gaslighting was so consistent and so subtle that I started questioning my own perceptions. Maybe I was being oversensitive. Maybe I was reading malice into normal teenage behavior. Maybe I was the problem. Tom and I got engaged on Alex's 16th birthday. I thought the timing would make Alex feel included, show him that I wanted him to be part of our new family. Instead, it seemed to flip some kind of switch in him. Congratulations, he said when Tom told him about the proposal, but his eyes were ice cold. I hope you'll both be very happy. That night, I overheard Alex on the phone with someone I assumed his mother Sarah. Yeah, they're engaged, he was saying. I know, it's disgusting. She's trying so hard to replace you, Mom. Don't worry, though. I have a plan. She won't be around much longer. When I mentioned this conversation to Tom, he dismissed it. He's just processing the engagement. He's probably feeling disloyal to his mother. He'll come around. But Alex wasn't coming around. He was planning. The wedding was small, just immediate family and close friends. Sarah even came, which I thought was mature of her. She was polite to me, if cool, and seemed focused on Alex's well-being. What I didn't know was that during the reception, while Tom and I were greeting guests, Alex and Sarah were having a very different conversation. She's trying to turn Dad against me, Alex told his mother, just loud enough for me to overhear as I passed their table. She makes these rules and gets upset when I don't follow them perfectly. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home. Sarah's response chilled me. Don't worry, baby. If things get bad, really bad, you know you can always come stay with me. They were already planning his exit strategy. The first few months of marriage were a delicate dance. Alex would push boundaries, I'd enforce consequences, Tom would get caught in the middle. But I was trying so hard to be the perfect stepmother that I bent over backwards to accommodate Alex's adjustment period. When he left dishes in the sink for days, I'd wash them myself rather than create conflict. When he had friends over without asking and they trashed the living room, I'd clean it up and gently suggest he ask next time. When he was rude or dismissive, I'd chalk it up to teenage hormones and try to be patient. But Alex interpreted my patience as weakness. And he started pushing harder. He began bringing girls over when Tom was traveling, having them sleep over without permission. When I'd object, he'd act like I was being unreasonably controlling. It's not like we're doing anything, he'd say. God, Jennifer, you're so uptight. My dad wouldn't care. But when Tom came home and I'd mention it, Alex's story would change. She's exaggerating, Dad. Mia just came over to study and it got late, so she crashed on the couch. Jennifer made such a big deal about it. The truth would get muddied, and I'd end up looking like the stepmother who couldn't handle normal teenage behavior. This pattern continued and escalated. Alex would have parties when Tom and I went out for dinner, leaving our house reeking of alcohol and weed. When confronted, he'd claim it was just a few friends hanging out and that I was being dramatic. He'd eat food I'd specifically bought for special dinners or work lunches, then act confused when I mentioned it. "Oh, was that yours?" I didn't know. Dad said I could eat anything in the kitchen. He'd blast music late at night, then claim his headphones were broken, and he didn't realize how loud it was. He'd leave wet towels on my antique wooden dresser, forgetting that I'd asked him not to. Small things, but constant, like water torture. The real escalation began when Tom started backing me up more consistently. After about 8 months of marriage, Tom began to see the patterns. When Alex left messes, Tom would make him clean them up. When Alex was disrespectful at dinner, Tom would call him out. When Alex pushed boundaries, Tom would enforce consequences. I watched Alex's face during these moments, and what I saw terrified me. It wasn't embarrassment or frustration or even normal teenage anger. It was cold, calculating rage. Like he was making mental notes, planning his next move. That's when the really scary stuff started. Alex began staying out past curfew regularly, then claiming he'd told Tom his plans when Tom was at work and I wasn't around to hear. When Tom would call him on it, Alex would get defensive. "I did tell you, Dad. Maybe Jennifer didn't hear me, but I definitely told you." He started forgetting his key and banging on the door at all hours, claiming he'd texted both of us, but we didn't respond. He'd leave his dirty laundry in the bathroom for weeks, then claim he thought the housekeeper would get it, even though we'd never had a housekeeper. But the most disturbing incident happened on a Thursday night in November. Tom was traveling for work, and Alex was supposed to be at soccer practice until 8 p.m. I was home grading papers when I heard the front door open at 6:30. "Alex? You're home early." Practice was canceled, he called back, but something in his voice seemed off. About an hour later, I went upstairs to use the bathroom and noticed Alex's door was closed, and there were voices coming from inside. Multiple voices, both male and female. I knocked. "Alex? Do you have friends over?" "Just Jake," he called back, but I could clearly hear at least 3 different people. "I need you to ask before having people over when your dad and I aren't home." "Okay, whatever." 20 minutes later, I heard the front door open and close multiple times. When I looked out the window, I saw at least 6 teenagers leaving our house, including several I'd never seen before. When I knocked on Alex's door again, he cracked it open just enough to show his face. "What's up?" "Alex, you had a bunch of people over without asking. We've talked about this." "No, I didn't. Jake was here for like 10 minutes to borrow a book. That's it." I saw multiple people leaving the house. I heard voices. Alex opened his door wider, and I could see his room was spotless. Not just clean, spotless. Like it had been scrubbed down. I don't know what you think you saw, but it was just Jake. Maybe you heard the TV? The gaslighting was so blatant, so obviously false, that I felt like I was losing my mind. But Alex delivered it with such sincere confusion that it made me question my own senses. When Tom came home the next day, I told him what happened. Alex's story to his father was slightly different. Jake came over to work on a project. Jennifer seemed really paranoid about it for some reason. She kept checking on us and asking weird questions. I think she might have been hearing things. That phrase, hearing things, was carefully chosen. Alex was planting the idea that I was unstable, unreliable, possibly having some kind of mental health episode. Tom was caught in an impossible position. He loved me, but Alex was his son. The kid seemed genuinely confused and hurt by my accusations. And I had to admit, I was starting to sound paranoid even to myself. That's when Alex made his masterstroke. It was a Tuesday morning in December. Tom had left for a 3-day business trip the night before. Alex had been unusually sweet the previous evening, even giving me a hug goodnight and saying, "Thanks for making dinner, Jennifer. It was really good." I should have known something was wrong. I was getting ready for work around 7 a.m. when there was a knock at the door. Not a normal knock, the kind of authoritative pounding that makes your stomach drop and your heart race. The kind that means serious trouble. I opened the door to find 2 CPS workers, a police officer, and a detective. "Ma'am, are you Jennifer Morrison?" Yes, that's me. What's going on? We've received reports of child abuse in this household. We need to speak with you and examine the minor who lives here. The world tilted. My ears started ringing. I'm sorry, what? There's been a mistake. I would never. Ma'am, we have photographic evidence and a detailed report from the alleged victim. We need you to step outside while we conduct our investigation. They handed me a folder. Inside were photos that made my blood run cold and my knees buckle. Alex, shirtless, covered in what looked like finger-shaped bruises on his upper arms, back, and shoulders. His face was swollen on one side, with what appeared to be a handprint across his left cheek. His eyes were red and puffy from crying, and in every photo, he looked small and scared and heartbroken. He reported to his school counselor yesterday afternoon, the lead CPS worker explained. Said his stepmother had been physically abusing him for months, but he was afraid to tell anyone because you'd threatened to hurt him worse if he spoke up. I felt like I was drowning. This is impossible. I've never touched him. I've never even raised my voice to him. Tom, my husband, he knows I would never. According to Alex, his father is aware of the abuse, but won't intervene because he's financially dependent on you and afraid you'll leave him if he speaks up. Every word was a perfectly placed knife. Alex had thought of everything. Where is Alex now? He's staying with his mother in Richmond until this investigation is complete. She drove up as soon as he called her yesterday. Of course she did. Sarah was already part of the plan. They interviewed me for 4 hours. For hours of the same questions asked different ways, designed to trip me up, to find inconsistencies in my story. They photographed every room in the house, looking for evidence of violence. They went through my phone, my computer, my personal belongings. Meanwhile, Alex was giving his statement from the safety of his mother's hotel room. His story was elaborate and heartbreaking. According to him, I'd been hitting him for months, but only when Tom wasn't around. I'd threatened to hurt him worse if he told anyone. I was jealous of his relationship with his father and took my anger out on him physically. The most damning part of his statement was how detailed it was. He could describe exactly when and where each incident of abuse had occurred. He had dates, times, circumstances. He'd even kept a secret journal documenting my alleged violence, complete with photos of his injuries. But here's the thing about sociopaths, they're often too clever for their own good. Alex had created evidence so perfect, so comprehensive, that it should have raised red flags. But the investigators were seeing a traumatized teenager with physical proof of abuse, and I was the obvious suspect. When Tom rushed home from his business trip, he arrived to find our house still crawling with investigators and his wife potentially facing criminal charges. Jennifer, what the hell is going on? I tried to explain, but how do you explain the impossible? How do you prove a negative? How do you convince someone that extensive physical evidence was fabricated? Tom spoke with the investigators privately for over an hour. When he came out, his face was gray. They showed me the photos, he said quietly. The bruises are real. They're consistent with someone grabbing him, hitting him. Tom, I didn't make those bruises. Then who did? I had no answer. That's when I realized how perfectly Alex had trapped me. Any denial sounded exactly like what an abuser would say. That evening, Alex called the house. I could only hear Tom's side of the conversation, but it was devastating. I'm so sorry, buddy. I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Of course you were scared. No, you did the right thing. I love you so much. We're going to figure this out. When he hung up, Tom wouldn't even look at me. He's terrified to come home, Tom said. He asked if you'd be here. This is my home, Tom. He's a child, Jennifer. A child who's been hurt. By someone other than me. Tom's silence spoke volumes. Over the next week, Alex's campaign reached its crescendo. He returned to the house twice for supervised visits, during which he secretly recorded conversations with both Tom and me. But these weren't innocent recordings. Alex had learned to provoke discussions that could be edited to sound incriminating. During one visit, he started talking about a school project on family dynamics. Do you think it's normal for parents and step-parents to get physical when they're disciplining kids? He asked innocently. Physical discipline should always be appropriate and limited, I responded. thinking we were having an academic discussion. It should never be done in anger, and it should never leave marks. What Alex's recording captured was me saying physical and never leave marks in the same conversation. Edited together, it sounded like I was admitting to hitting him while being careful not to leave evidence. He pulled the same trick with Tom, asking theoretical questions about discipline and recording the responses to create fake evidence of his father's knowledge of the abuse. But Alex's masterstroke was yet to come. He'd somehow created fake text messages between us, showing me allegedly threatening him. Screenshots of conversations that never happened, but that looked completely authentic. Messages like, "You better keep your mouth shut," and "What happens in this house stays in this house, and no one will believe you anyway." He showed these to the investigators, to his mother, to his school counselor. The evidence against me was mounting, and every piece of it was completely fabricated. The most devastating blow came when Sarah filed an emergency custody motion, requesting immediate full custody of Alex and citing me as a clear danger to his physical and emotional well-being. In her filing, Sarah included statements from Alex's friends, teachers, and even neighbors, all describing how different and withdrawn Alex had become since Tom and I got married. How he'd lost weight, seemed anxious, was struggling in school. Mrs. Henderson, our next-door neighbor, provided a statement saying she'd heard raised voices and crying coming from our house on multiple occasions when Tom was traveling. She'd even seen Alex outside with visible injuries that he'd tried to hide from her. Of course, I later learned that Alex had cultivated these witnesses carefully, telling Mrs. Henderson that he'd been clumsy lately and kept falling down or walking into things. He'd shown up at her door with fake injuries, asking to use her phone because his was broken, giving her just enough information to piece together a narrative of abuse without directly accusing me. With his teachers, he'd been subtly different, more subdued, occasionally wincing when he moved, mentioning that he was tired because he didn't sleep well the night before. All signs that could be interpreted as evidence of abuse, but deniable if questioned directly. Alex had spent months building a case against me, creating witnesses and evidence with the patience and skill of a professional con artist. And he was only 16 years old. The worst part was watching Tom struggle with the cognitive dissonance. He knew me. He'd lived with me for over a year, seen how I interacted with my students, watched me care for him when he was sick. The idea that I was secretly violent toward his child should have been unthinkable. But the evidence was overwhelming. Photos, recordings, witnesses, a detailed timeline of abuse. And Alex's performance was Oscar-worthy, the traumatized child bravely speaking up after months of suffering in silence. "Maybe you should stay at your sister's while this gets sorted out," Tom suggested one evening, about 2 weeks after the initial investigation. "You're kicking me out of our home? I'm trying to protect everyone involved." "By believing his lies over your wife's word?" "Jennifer, I've seen the photos. I've heard the recordings. I don't want to believe it, but you do believe it." Tom's silence was answer enough. I packed a bag and moved into my sister Kate's spare room that night. Within 48 hours, I was suspended from my teaching job pending the completion of the investigation. The school district couldn't risk having someone under investigation for child abuse around other children. My entire life was crumbling. My marriage, my career, my reputation, everything was being destroyed by a teenager's lies. And the most horrifying part was how perfect those lies were. Alex had anticipated every possible defense, every hole in his story, every question that might be asked. He created an alternate reality so convincing that even I started to doubt myself. Late at night, lying in my sister's spare bed, I would replay every interaction I'd had with Alex, searching for moments where I might have been too harsh, too physical, too intimidating. Had I grabbed his arm too tightly when stopping him from walking away during a conversation? Had I raised my voice in a way that could be construed as threatening? Had I somehow, without realizing it, become the monster he was describing? The psychological torture of false accusations is something you can't understand until you've lived through it. It's not just the fear of legal consequences or social ostracism. It's the way it makes you question your own sanity, your own memories, your fundamental understanding of who you are as a person. 3 weeks into my exile, I was at the lowest point of my life. I'd hired a lawyer, but she was pessimistic about my chances. The evidence against me was extensive and convincing, and juries were naturally sympathetic to children claiming abuse. I was facing potential jail time, the permanent loss of my career, and the destruction of my marriage. I was scrolling through social media in a depressive haze, looking at the normal lives of people who weren't accused of child abuse, when I saw something that made me sit up straight. Alex had posted a story on Instagram. It was just a quick video of him laughing with friends at some restaurant, but something in the background caught my eye. On the table behind him, partially visible, was what looked like a makeup compact, specifically, the kind of theatrical makeup used to create fake injuries. My heart started pounding. I screenshotted the story before it disappeared, then started digging deeper into Alex's social media presence. Like most teenagers, Alex was active on multiple platforms: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat. And like most teenagers, he vastly overestimated his own cleverness and underestimated other people's ability to figure out what he was doing. What I found, buried in months of posts across different platforms, was the smoking gun I'd been praying for. Alex had documented everything. It started with a private Twitter account he thought only his close friends could see. The username was something like Alex the Genius, and his bio read Mastermind in Training. Operation Evil Stepmother is a go, he'd tweeted back in September, 2 months before he made his report to CPS. Phase 1. Establish pattern of Jennifer being crazy and paranoid. Phase 2. Create physical evidence. Phase 3. Get authorities involved. Phase 4. Watch Jennifer's life burn. I felt sick reading it, but I kept digging. Dad actually yelled at Jennifer today for making false accusations about my party. She looked like she was about to cry. This is almost too easy. Practicing my scared victim voice for when I talk to the school counselor. Oscar-worthy performance incoming. Just finished creating batch number 3 of bruises. Getting better at the color blending. Hollywood makeup artists have nothing on me. Hashtag special effects. But the most damning evidence was a video he'd posted to his close friend's story on Instagram 2 weeks before he reported the abuse. In the video, Alex was in his bathroom, shirtless, with an array of makeup spread across the counter. Stage makeup, the professional kind used in theater and film to create realistic injuries. Tutorial time, he said to the camera with a huge grin. How to get rid of your evil stepmother. Step 1, make it look like she beats you. He proceeded to demonstrate his technique, showing how he layered different colors of makeup to create realistic bruises. Purple for the deep tissue damage, blue for the fresh impact, yellow and green for the healing stages. He even showed how to create the swelling effect on his face using contouring techniques. The key, he said, admiring his work in the mirror, is making sure they look real enough to fool CPS and the police. Lucky for me, I took drama class freshman year and learned all about stage makeup. He documented the whole process, explaining how he'd researched what real abuse injuries looked like, how he'd practiced the application techniques, even how he'd tested different makeups to find ones that were photograph-resistant and wouldn't smudge easily. But he didn't stop there. There were screenshots of him creating fake text conversations using apps designed for making fake social media posts. Voice memos of him practicing different emotional tones: scared, hurt, resigned, traumatized. Even detailed notes about which injuries to place where for maximum believability. Week 1. Establish pattern of Jennifer being mean and unreasonable. Week 2. Create physical evidence and document it. Week 3. Report to school counselor with perfect victim performance. Week 4. Watch Jennifer go to jail. The most horrifying discovery was a group chat he had with 3 of his closest friends, where he'd been sharing updates on his project for months. Dude, this is insane, one friend had written. You're literally framing your stepmom for child abuse. She deserves it, Alex had responded. She's trying to replace my mom and control my dad. This is war. But what if you get caught? Isn't this like super illegal? I won't get caught. I'm too smart and she's too stupid. Plus, everyone always believes the kid in these situations. It's foolproof. What if your dad finds out you're lying? He won't. Even if he suspects something, he can't risk being wrong. What father wants to believe his son is capable of something like this? He'll side with me because he has to. The casual cruelty in these messages was breathtaking. Alex wasn't just destroying my life, he was enjoying it. This wasn't a desperate kid acting out, it was a calculating sociopath executing a carefully planned attack. But the most damning evidence came from a longer video he'd posted to his private TikTok account, one he thought was completely secure. In this video, Alex gave a step-by-step breakdown of his entire plan. He explained how he'd studied my behavior patterns, learned my triggers, figured out exactly how to provoke me into reactions that could be misinterpreted. He showed off his collection of fake evidence, the staged photos, the fake text conversations, even recordings he'd made of himself crying and pleading, which he planned to claim were captured during abuse incidents. The beauty of this plan, he said to the camera, is that it's not just about the fake evidence. It's about the psychological profile. Jennifer's a teacher. She's trained to be patient and nurturing. So when she finally snaps and gets frustrated with me, it looks even worse because it's so out of character. I've been pushing her buttons for months, making her doubt herself, making her seem unstable to my dad. The fake bruises are just the final nail in the coffin. He even explained his timing strategy, waiting until Tom was traveling so there would be no witnesses to contradict his story, then immediately running to his mother for safety, so he wouldn't be available for follow-up questioning. Mom's been planning to file for custody anyway, he said with a smirk. She hates that Dad remarried. This gives her the perfect excuse to take me away and punish him for choosing Jennifer over her. That's when I realized this wasn't just Alex's plan. Sarah was involved from the beginning. The divorce might have been finalized, but Sarah had never gotten over losing Tom. Destroying his new marriage was just as important to her as getting custody of Alex. The video continued with Alex explaining how he'd cultivated witnesses, carefully showing fake injuries to neighbors and teachers without directly accusing me, letting them draw their own conclusions. How he'd lost weight intentionally and acted withdrawn at school to support the narrative of an abused child. How he'd even researched the legal system to understand exactly what evidence would be most compelling to investigators and prosecutors. The best part, he said, grinning at the camera, is that even if Jennifer somehow proves her innocence, her life is already ruined. She's lost her job, her reputation, probably her marriage. Dad will never fully trust her again, even if the charges are dropped. And I'll just be the brave kid who spoke up about abuse. Win-win. But Alex made one critical error in his arrogance. He was so proud of his masterpiece that he couldn't resist sharing it. And in the age of social media, nothing stays secret forever. I spent the next 8 hours methodically documenting everything I'd found. Screenshots, screen recordings, timestamps. I created a comprehensive timeline showing exactly when Alex had posted each piece of evidence, cross-referenced with when he claimed the abuse had occurred. The beautiful irony was that Alex had been so thorough in documenting his lies that he'd created an ironclad case against himself. Every fake bruise had a tutorial video. Every fabricated text conversation had a behind-the-scenes screenshot. Every staged photo had multiple takes showing the production process. But I didn't go to the police immediately. I was smarter than that, and I'd learned from watching Alex's methodical approach. I hired a forensics expert to verify that the social media evidence was authentic and hadn't been manipulated. I had my lawyer create a comprehensive brief documenting the timeline and showing how Alex's own posts contradicted his abuse allegations. Most importantly, I waited for the custody hearing. I wanted Alex to commit fully to his lies under oath, in front of a judge, with no opportunity to backtrack or claim he was just joking about the social media posts. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in February. The courtroom was packed with everyone whose life Alex had manipulated. Tom sat with Alex, who was putting on his best traumatized victim performance. Sarah sat across from them with her lawyer, ready to finally take full custody of her endangered son. The CPS workers were there with their thick files full of Alex's fabricated evidence. And then there was me, with my lawyer and a folder that was about to change everything. Alex had prepared for this moment for months. He'd practiced his testimony, rehearsed his emotional responses, even planned which memories of abuse would be most compelling to the judge. He was wearing a button-down shirt that he could easily roll up to show the court his latest batch of fake bruises. When the hearing began, Alex took the stand and delivered a performance that would have made professional actors jealous. He spoke in a quiet, shaky voice about months of suffering in silence. He described specific incidents of abuse with heartbreaking detail. He even broke down crying when describing how he'd finally found the courage to report what was happening to him. "I was so scared," he sobbed. "I thought no one would believe me. Jennifer is so good at acting nice in front of other people. But when we were alone, she was different. Mean.